Hare Krishna. Tonight we're continuing with our study of Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace A.C.Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Tonight we're continuing with chapter 4. We'll finish chapter 4 tonight from verses 34 to 42 of the 4th chapter. So just a quick summary, that the 4th chapter, entitled Jnana Yoga, talks about transcendental knowledge. That's the subject matter of the chapter. The previous chapter, as we've mentioned, is called Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga means working, action. And we need to marry karma and jnana together in order to be successful in our lives. In other words, if you are performing activity, which we all do, we're all active by nature, as Krishna explains in the beginning of the 3rd chapter of the Gita. When you're active, you need to act with knowledge. Because if you act without knowledge, you'll make a lot of mistakes in your life, and your life will become problematic. Therefore, you need to learn to act in life, but act with knowledge. Transcendental knowledge, spiritual knowledge, Krishna conscious direction. So this is what we're speaking about here. Now tonight, Krishna has spoken in this chapter about how to receive knowledge by performing sacrifices and so forth. But now Krishna is about to give his verdict about how to receive transcendental knowledge, spiritual knowledge, most effectively. So how do we receive transcendental knowledge most effectively? Krishna will tell us in verse 34. Now, Bhagavad Gita verse 434 is one of the most famous verses in the entire Bhagavad Gita, and I've heard that Srila Prabhupada once said, it is the most important verse in the Bhagavad Gita. There's no more important verse in the entire Bhagavad Gita than this verse. So we'll discuss this verse. We'll try to get an understanding of why it's so important. And we will, and by this verse, we will understand what is the most effective way to receive transcendental knowledge. So text number 34. Tadvidi pranipatena pari prashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadash. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So, Rupa Goswami points out that, as Bhurujan Prabhu mentions in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, Surrender Unto Me, Rupa Goswami explains to us that the first item of bhakti, which is mentioned in Nectar of Devotion, chapter 6, the first item of bhakti out of all the 64 items of bhakti is Ado Guru Pada Shraya, taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. This is how spiritual life begins, right? When we take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. Now, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, one has to approach a bona fide guru to receive knowledge. Such a guru should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the guru like a menial servant, without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized guru is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. When the student is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries becomes perfect. So, as we said, in this verse, Krishna is giving his opinion. God is giving his opinion as to what is the best way to receive spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge. He says you have to approach a guru, as Prabhupada explains in the purport. There's no more effective way. It's just like anything in life. If you want to learn something, the best way to learn something is to approach a teacher. If you want to study at university, find a professor, find someone who can teach you the subject matter. That's the most effective way to learn. So in spiritual life, what is the best way to learn? You find a guru, you find a teacher, and the teacher will help you to understand spiritual knowledge. So, such a guru must be accepted in full surrender. As in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna, in the 7th verse of the second chapter, Arjuna says, Shishyasteham satimam tvam prapanam. Now I am your disciple, I am a soul surrendered unto you, please instruct me. Prapana means surrendered. Until we are ready to surrender to the Guru, we cannot receive transcendental knowledge. Right? You only get knowledge once you're willing to surrender. If you're not willing to surrender, you don't receive spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge, Krishna conscious knowledge. So we need to learn to surrender. Right? Spiritual life is all about sharana, sharanagati, right? Prapana, surrender. Krishna says at the very end of the Bhagavad Gita, just surrender unto me. Mam ekam sharana braja. Spiritual life, you get realizations when you surrender to the lotus feet of a spiritual master. That is the secret of success in spiritual life. So, Prabhupada says, one should serve the Guru like a menial servant, without false prestige. We need to perform menial services to our gurus, because it puts you in a humble state of mind. And when you're willing to perform menial services, simple services, you can then, you will receive transcendental knowledge or spiritual realization. It will come automatically. So that is the secret of success in spiritual life. You need to learn how to surrender, right? And you need to learn how to perform menial service, because this is training us for when we go back to the spiritual world, when we go back to Krishna, the spiritual world. When we go back to Krishna, when we go back to the spiritual world, we will be performing menial services. So it is training us. And in the material world, because our ego is very big, as Prabhupada says, we have to give up false prestige. Prestige means we want to always be recognized and seen for being someone very significant. We all have that desire. I want to be significant. I want to be recognized. I want prestige. Spiritual life is the opposite of that, right? It's the opposite of being prestigious. That means we have to become menial. We have to become humble in our service. We have to give up the desire for recognition. Yeah. But in the material world, people want prestige. They want recognition. And sometimes people don't like to perform menial services. So this is an impediment. Therefore, you have to serve the Guru like a menial servant. Just like we see the famous example of Narottama. Narottama Das Thakur wanted to take initiation from from Lokanath Goswami. And it is said for 1 year, he would, because Vrindavan was a forest at that time, and people would pass stool in a forested area. So every day, Lokanath Goswami would go to pass stool somewhere in the forest, and Narottama would go and clean the area so that when his guru came the next day, it was clean. Yeah, that was his bhakti, that was his devotion to his guru. He had that mood of devotion to the guru. So we need to develop that mood of bhakti, of devotion to the spiritual master. We need to give up our false prestige if we want to receive transcendental knowledge and actually understand our eternal relationship with Krishna. Prabhupada said, and this is a very important line from Prabhupada's purport, which has struck me many times over the years. Satisfaction of the self-realized guru is the secret of advance in spiritual life. The secret, the rahasya of advancement. How? Because sometimes devotees ask, how do I advance in Krishna consciousness? How do I advance in spiritual life? Prabhupada is saying here, the secret of advancement, the secret of success is satisfaction of the self-realized guru. Right? You have to serve the guru like a menial servant. And by doing so, you will become qualified to understand spiritual life. The guru must become satisfied. Right? When the guru is satisfied, then we make advancement. He blesses us. Right? And then in turn we receive Krishna's favor. And Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Yena Mamupiyantite. Krishna then gives realization of how to come to him. So then Prabhupada says, when the student is submissive, because there are three elements, submission, inquiry, and service. These are the three elements that Krishna says that we must have if we want to receive transcendental knowledge or get realization in Krishna consciousness. We must be submissive, not argumentative. That's a sign of genuine humility. Genuine humility means I understand, I am submissive, I understand that I have to surrender to you. I understand I don't know everything. Right? This is submission. I don't know everything. Once again, in the material world, people think they know everything. I know. We think we know everything. And when you think you know something, you can't be taught. So we have to come into spiritual life in that mood of being in the mood of submission, right? In the mood of surrender, to be submissive. I don't know everything. Please instruct me. Please guide me. And when you're always ready to render service, right? You inquire, you're submissive, and you're always ready. That's the qualification of a disciple. Always ready to render service, not just to the guru, but to any Vaishnava. We see the Vaishnavas as the representatives of the guru. Then reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries becomes perfect. person who receives the most transcendental knowledge is the most inquisitive person. If you're inquisitive, you will understand transcendental knowledge. If you're not inquisitive, it'll be very difficult for you to understand. Then Prabhupada says in the purport, the path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. Krishna therefore advises us to approach a guru in disciplic succession. Prabhupada says the path of spiritual realization, it's undoubtedly difficult. In other words, you need assistance. That's why we need gurus. It's not easy. You won't understand the absolute truth by yourself. You will only understand the absolute truth when you are willing to approach and accept the shelter of the lotus feet of a spiritual master. Then you will understand spiritual knowledge. Otherwise, it's too difficult. To understand everything by yourself, it's not possible. Right? You need gurus to guide you. Prabhupada then says, one must be able to pass the test of the guru. And when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. A bona fide guru is by nature very kind to the disciple. Prabhupada's words are so powerful in his purports. This purport is famous and so important. Prabhupada says, one must be able to pass the test of the guru. Right? Prabhupada explained the guru will never give you an instruction. He will never test you or give you an instruction that you cannot pass. If he gives you an instruction, he also gives you the shakti or the ability or his blessings, which will allow you to fulfill his instruction. Right? That's the guru's position. He will give you whatever you need to become perfect. So you must be able to pass the test. When the guru gives you the instruction, he also gives you the ability to fulfill the instruction. And you must pass the test. When you pass the test, you make advancement in spiritual life. And then Prabhupada says, when he sees the desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. The guru has to see that you have genuine desire to make advancement in Krishna consciousness. The guru has to see that. A genuine desire to understand, right, the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. When the guru sees that, then he blesses you, right, with transcendental knowledge. Then he will explain the intimate intricacies of spiritual life. Because Prabhupada says a bona fide guru is by nature very kind toward the disciple. So if we can remain humble and qualified by remaining humble, we will receive the mercy of the guru, because the guru is automatically very kind by nature. Any points so far? So text 35. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge, you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. So in the commentary, Burujambaru says, in his commentary, Srila Baladev Vijayabhushana comments that one result of knowledge is that we will no longer fall into illusion. This means, this is the result of knowledge. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andaka. Krishna is like the sun, transcendental knowledge, Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito. It illuminates the heart. It illuminates the consciousness. That is the result of transcendental knowledge. It illuminates our consciousness. It brings us to the spiritual platform. It makes us understand Jivara Srupahoy Krishnera Nichadas, that we are Krishna's eternal servant. It brings us to the spiritual platform. It gives us spiritual vision, Pandit Samadarshana. Right? That is the benefit of transcendental knowledge, of spiritual life. So Prabhupada says in the purport that the result of receiving knowledge from the self-realized soul is learning that all living beings are part and parcels of Krishna. Right? Pandit Samadarshana. You see the living entities equally. The elephant, the dog eater, the brahmana, right? The humble sage. You see the malecha, the yavana. You see everyone as being equal in the sense that you see everyone has the soul within them. The sense of an existence separate from Krishna is called Maya. Krishna is the cause of all causes. So when you see this world and the things in this world as separate from Krishna, that is the definition of Maya, that which is not. When you forget Krishna, right? That is Maya. Yeah, we all fall into Maya. We all forget Krishna. So all of us have to come to the transcendental platform, where through transcendental knowledge, we do not forget Krishna. We remember Krishna at all moments. We see Krishna everywhere. We don't fall into Maya, into illusion. Maya means when we forget Krishna, we stop seeing Krishna in this world. Right? That is called Maya, illusion. Prabhupada says in the purport, bodily differences arise from forgetfulness of the service of Krishna. But when one is engaged in service, one becomes at once liberated from illusion. One can acquire such pure knowledge only from the Guru and thereby avoid the delusion that the living entity is equal to Krishna. So when we stop serving Krishna, we fall into Maya. Transcendental knowledge, hearing the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing these transcendental subject matters reawakens our Krishna consciousness, because we forget Krishna. So thereby, by hearing the philosophy of these ancient teachings, we remember Krishna once again. So in this world, people, due to forgetfulness of Krishna, they see bodies differently. Just like we have the Ukrainians and the Russians fighting. Why? Because they forget Krishna and they see bodies as being different. Or the Palestinians and the Israelis fighting. Why? Because they are seeing things as different. They forget Krishna and then they see things as this is duality. This is illusion. So a devotee is free from duality. A devotee is free from illusion. Right? And therefore he does not fall into Maya. He does not see the difference. And Prabhupada explains why, because he's absorbed in service to Krishna. What is the result of knowledge? Jnana vijnana ashtikyam. Jnana means knowledge. Vijnana means realization. What's the result of transcendental knowledge? We will do service. Okay, I understand. I am the soul. I am Krishna's eternal servant. Then you do service. That is realization. That's what we're looking for. If you don't do service, it means your knowledge is not realized. You might be very learned, but if you're not serving, your knowledge is not, you don't have realization. And when one has proper knowledge, one has a correct philosophical underpinning for one's actions. Prabhupada points out here in the purport that the Mayavadis, they don't have a correct understanding. You know, they have a philosophy that you can become one with God, which is not logical. How can we become one with God? What sort of an ego must one have to think that they can become one with God, equal to God? Prabhupada said this is the last snare of Maya. So when one receives correct transcendental knowledge, one overcomes this illusion. So, any points? Even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross the ocean of miseries. So Prabhupada says in the purport that the proper understanding of one's constitutional position in relationship to Krishna is so nice that it can at once lift one from the struggle for existence in the ocean of nescience. So, this is the qualification to take to bhakti. One can only take to bhakti, like we all have, the path of bhakti, or devotional service, when you are sufficiently uncovered by karma and jnana, meaning that if you have too many material desires, sinful desires, you can't take to devotional service. You can understand it's what I should do, but you can't take to it if you're too attached to enjoying sense gratification. Then, jnana, if you're too attached to this impersonalistic philosophy that I can become God, you also cannot take to devotional service. So you must be sufficiently free from karma and jnana to take to bhakti or devotional service. Prabhupada says perfect knowledge received from Krishna is the path of liberation. So this is what we're doing right now. You know, Prabhupada set up these courses: Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav, Bhakti Vedanta, Bhakti Sarvabhauma. Prabhupada set up these courses. Why? So that we could study the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Right? So that we could study this philosophy. Why? Because then we're receiving the teachings of Krishna through parampara. What is the qualification of the gurus? What is the qualification of the devotees, the teachers? Prabhupada says they do not change anything. Right? They do not change anything. That's the qualification to become a guru or a teacher. Right? We can't change anything. And if you hear from someone who is delivering the message as it is, right, then you are getting the benefit of hearing Krishna's pure teachings in parampara, in disciplic succession. And if you hear like this in parampara, then you will advance in your Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada says the boat of Krishna consciousness is very simple, but most sublime. So the teachings, the practice and the teachings of Krishna consciousness are simple, but they're extremely deep. They're subliminal. And to access them, you must have bhakti or devotion. And according to your bhakti or devotion, you will access. Okay. Now, what is the one of the results of receiving divya gyan or transcendental knowledge? As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. Gurujan Prabhu writes in his commentary, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments, Krishna says, for those whose heart has become purified, I completely destroy whatever karma has already been generated, with the exception of his prarabdha karma. Transcendental knowledge thus destroys all reactions, both pious and sinful, all that is except prarabdha karma or matured reactions, such as one's present material body. Krishna now further glorifies transcendental knowledge. This is a very powerful point. When you perform devotional service and you rise to the spiritual platform and you serve Krishna without motivation and without interruption, what takes place? All of your sinful reactions are destroyed. Your karma is destroyed. Right? Except Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says, except your prarabdha karma, which you have to wait for that to be destroyed. In other words, your material body doesn't just disappear. You have to wait for it. If you're surrendering fully to Krishna, you just have to wait until the end of your life, and then your material body will disappear, and then you will enter into Krishna's service. Prabhupada says in the purport that perfect knowledge of the self and super self and of their relationship is compared herein to fire. This fire burns up all four stages of reactions to impious and impious activities, turning them to ashes. So, many years ago, I heard one of the sannyasis, one of the gurus in the Hare Krishna movement, he said that when a brahmachari, very fixed up brahmachari, an advanced brahmachari, senior brahmachari, or a sannyasi speaks, when a brahmachari or sannyasi speaks, he said their words are like fire. They will burn up your sinful desires. They will burn up your attachment to enjoying in this material world separate from Krishna. That's the potency. Right? So Krishna's words are like that. Spiritual knowledge is like that. When you receive spiritual knowledge, it burns up the reactions. It burns up your material desires. That's why Prabhupada said we have to read his books. We have to study the philosophy of Krishna consciousness so that we can burn up our sinful desires, our material desires, and we can learn to surrender to Krishna. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism. One who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. So, Prabhupada says in the purport, ignorance is the cause of our bondage. This is explained by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Nectar of Devotion. Avidya. Avidya means ignorance. Right? Ignorance is the cause of our bondage in this material world, forgetfulness of Krishna. And knowledge is the cause of our liberation. Right? So the more we hear about Krishna, the more we become detached from this material world and attracted to serve him. Transcendental knowledge is the mature fruit of devotional service. So when you serve sincerely, you will gain vijnana. Vijnana means realized knowledge. You will realize, eventually, we will realize our eternal relationship with Krishna. This knowledge and peace culminate in Krishna consciousness. That is the last word in the Bhagavad Gita. Transcendental knowledge is the mature fruit of devotional service. Yeah, Prabhupada's statements are extremely powerful. This section is very powerful. A faithful person who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Prabhupada says in the purport, such knowledge in Krishna consciousness can be achieved by a faithful person who believes firmly in Krishna. Right? Faith or Shraddha is the essence or the basis of spiritual life. Right? Spiritual life, the basis of spiritual life is Shraddha, faith. Right? And as we progress in Krishna consciousness, our faith will be tested. Right? Our faith will be tested in due course of time. How serious are you to advance in Krishna consciousness? How serious are you to focus on Krishna? This is our faith. You know, you have to advance in spiritual life, you have to have strong faith. Faith that becomes so strong, it cannot be shaken by any external test. And Krishna will test all of us. Right? But we have to get to the point where even when we're tested, we do not waver in our faith. We stay fixed. We stay committed to advancing in Krishna consciousness. One is called faithful who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness, he can attain the highest perfection. So we understand that we do not go away. We do not leave the Krishna consciousness movement, even when our faith is tested. Right? We all go through tests of faith, but we do not leave. Prabhupada's guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, said, everyone else can leave, but you stay. Right? Each one of us should feel like that. Everyone else can go, that's okay, but I will stay. I will serve Krishna. This faith is attained by the discharge of devotional service and by chanting Hare Krishna, which cleanses one's heart of all material dirt. Over and above this, one should control the senses. Very important point. If you don't control the senses, you will not advance in Krishna consciousness. That's why someone who's very advanced in Krishna consciousness is called a Swami or a Goswami. A Swami or a Goswami means one who has controlled their senses. So you will attain perfection in Krishna consciousness. But first of all, in the beginning, you have to learn to control your senses. Once you've done this, you've controlled your senses, then you will receive the final goal, right? Which is to understand Krishna. You can't understand you're not the body if you don't have control of your senses, right? You have to become a Goswami. You have to become a master of the senses, right? The tongue, the belly, the genitals, the mind, anger, the urge to speak. Rupa Goswami speaks of these things. You know, all the senses need to be controlled. Then you can attain spiritual realization, right, and fully merge into Brahma Nirvana. But ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. Prabhupada says in the purport that one should follow the principles of Bhagavad Gita with faith and thereby be raised to the platform of knowledge. Only this knowledge will help one become promoted to the transcendental platform of spiritual understanding. One should follow in the footsteps of great acharyas and thereby attain success. So we will become successful. Only when we have faith that if we follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas, we will become self-realized. So this is the commitment we need to develop in our devotional service. By cultivating knowledge, we should get more faith. That's the result of cultivating knowledge. Our faith increases. You know, the more we hear about Krishna, the more we hear the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, the more our faith increases. And then we want to become, we want to surrender to Guru and Krishna more and more. Text number 41. One who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his actions, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus he is not bound by the reactions of work or conqueror of riches. So when you have knowledge, and that's that's what this section of Bhagavad Gita is about, understanding the connection between karma and jnana. When you have knowledge, you act properly. In this, when you have knowledge, you don't keep the fruits for yourself, you offer them to Krishna. Right? You're renounced. That's called yukta vairagya. Nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yukta vairagya uchate. Right? That's what the Bhagavad Gita is teaching us. Right? To give everything to Krishna. That is the mature fruit of transcendental knowledge. Right? We can have lots of book knowledge, but if we don't offer what we have to Krishna, then we lack knowledge. Krishna says to Arjuna, "Oh, conqueror of riches." Arjuna was about to fight to rule the earth, to become the most wealthy family on the earth. But they weren't doing this. They were not motivated just so that they could receive things for themselves. Right? They were motivated that they wanted to serve Krishna. They wanted to give everything to Krishna. Right? That's transcendental knowledge. So Prabhupada says in the purport, one who follows the instruction of Bhagavad Gita becomes free from all doubts by the grace of transcendental knowledge. As such, he is above bondage to action. Now the final verse in chapter 4. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga or bharata, stand and fight. So Prabhupada says in the purport, one who performs one's sacrifices in devotional service makes a perfect sacrifice. One who follows Bhagavad Gita as it is can very easily understand the two important divisions of spiritual knowledge. One should study Bhagavad Gita under the Guru with service and surrender. So we need to cultivate knowledge. That's why Prabhupada set up these courses. He wanted the devotees to study, to become learned. Prabhupada said Bhaktivedanta. It is the family name. We should all get the title Bhaktivedanta, which means we should study the whole Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam very carefully and become learned, right? Understand the philosophy. So then the philosophy fixes us in devotional service. I've shared this point a number of times that sometimes devotees come to us for counseling. Devotees come and they say, I'm struggling in my spiritual life. And we say to them, okay, you're struggling in your spiritual life. And one of the first things we ask is, are you reading Prabhupada's books? And quite often, when devotees say they're struggling, they say, no, I'm not reading Prabhupada's books very much. Of course, you're going to struggle. That's why we have to hear and chant on a daily basis, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, because then you will stay fixed in bhakti, fixed in devotional service. Otherwise, you will waver. You will constantly struggle in your bhakti, in your devotional service. Prabhupada says in the purport, a bona fide guru does not deviate from the instructions of Krishna as they were imparted millions of years ago to the sun god. This was spoken in the beginning of the chapter, that the guru must not change anything. That's the qualification. Prabhupada said we should all become gurus. And Prabhupada said the qualification of gurus, you do not change anything. Then you're qualified to be a spiritual master. So all of us should come to this platform where we become learned in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. We assist others. We teach others, right? And we help them also to understand Krishna. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions or comments tonight? Okay. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next week. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
See you next time.
See you next time. Hare Bol.